All right, friends, welcome back to A Sweet Taste of HeartScapes. This is our monthly free class that we hold every first Wednesday of the month here at HeartScapes Reiki. My name is Michaela. We are in Davis, California, Central California, and offering experiences in Reiki taught from its Japanese origins, in meditation classes, in a wide variety of arts therapy offerings, and occasionally yoga, depending on who's passing through our studio in a given week, and in SoulCollage. And that is what I wanted to focus our attention on for this month's class. Generally speaking, the way that I hold the kind of intention for these classes is that we're exploring practices that help us to live a life that is grounded, that is connected, and that is spacious, and to help us to remember ourselves. Often I'm talking about that through the lens of Reiki, which is one of the primary offerings that we work with here. But before I worked with Reiki, I worked with a practice called SoulCollage. And the two of them, while approaching the methodology in very different ways and coming from very different origins, actually help us to do almost the exact same thing, to again live a life that feels grounded, stable, rooted, that feels spacious, wide open, full of possibility, that feels connected to ourselves, to each other, and to the world, and that helps us to remember who we truly are. Reiki does this through meditation, through embodiment practices, through visualizations, through contemplation, through energy work, and SoulCollage does this through intuitive collaging, drawing on our imagination, our intuition, and found images out in the world to create essentially a personal oracle deck that represents the many, many aspects of ourselves. And once we have those aspects out in a visual form, a tangible, tactile form that we can see and work with and talk to, we can learn a great deal about ourselves and achieve the type of life that I just described. Welcome, Justine. Good to see you. And so while I have worked with SoulCollage personally for almost 12 years and as a registered SoulCollage facilitator with individuals and groups for almost that amount of time, it's been a while since I've brought SoulCollage actively into the work and the offerings of HeartScapes, largely because the pandemic really shut down, of course, in-person gatherings. And I really love to do SoulCollage in person. It was really hard to transition to an online space. But I have really been feeling the call to move back into offering SoulCollage and to really integrate it with the work of Reiki, because again, they are directing us to many of the same outcomes in our life. They work really beautifully together. And so I'll be leaning into offering SoulCollage offerings more actively over the next few months. I'll tell you more about what's coming up a little bit later in our conversation. But SoulCollage can be worked on through one-on-one work. I have clients that I've done mentoring arcs with using SoulCollage, doing introductory classes, doing deep dive classes, doing retreats, doing private parties, lots of different ways to bring this modality into our lives because it's fun. It's accessible. It has a really beautiful blend of being creative and kind of fun and lighthearted, but also able to take us to deep places very quickly. So that's enough of a preamble, I think, for today. As always, I'd love for us to begin by just dropping into our breath, just kind of coming into this moment, into this space together, and into this opportunity to be together around the context of SoulCollage, and then we will jump in. And so wherever you are, whether you're watching this live with me here on Zoom, or if you are watching on the recording, I'm going to invite you to settle in for a few breaths. If you're driving, take caution, be responsible, but let's just take a moment to drop in together. And so that always begins with settling our body into a position that feels comfortable and well supported in this moment, wherever you are. That can be a standing position, can be a seated position, can be a lying down position, as long as you feel well supported, well held by the ground below you, comfortable and able to allow your breath to move freely in your body. Allowing your belly to be soft to make room for your breath. And allowing your exhale to gently invite a bit more relaxation with each repetition. Thus bringing our breath and our body into alignment. Noticing if your breath wants to stay higher in your body. And if so, perhaps putting a hand on your belly to just gently invite your breath to move in and down. Coming into your low belly. And then bringing your mind into this posture, resting your attention on your breath, allowing your body to expand with the breath as you draw your attention inward, following your inhale. And coming to rest your attention in your low belly. Just resting your focus in the place just below your belly button and deep into the center of your body. And then from this centered place, this rooted place in the center of your belly, I invite you to imagine a spark of light. Like a campfire burning merrily and vigorously at the center of your low belly, warm and inviting. A beautiful warm glow in the center of the nourishing velvety darkness of your belly. And sitting at the edge of this campfire, feeling how well held it is by the circle of stones that it sits inside of. How well tended and well fed this fire is. I invite you to invite all the parts of you to join you in this center. Slowly emerging from the darkness, there are parts of you that represent your roles in society, your identities, your memories. The wisdom of your body and the way that you are connected to nature. The parts of you that are intuitive and open. The parts of you that are connected to bigger energy in the world, the archetypes of our human mind. And the parts that have been influenced by other people. So many parts that each of us contain. Inviting them to join you here around this fire. There are parts that make you feel strong and resourced. There are parts that are sometimes getting in the way, causing trouble. There are parts that you can barely see, still partly in the shadows. There are parts that shine like a lighthouse, like a beacon. There are parts that generate a great feeling of creativity and inspiration. There are parts that are afraid. All of them are welcome here around this central fire. And all of them have something to teach us, something to contribute to the whole of who you are. One whole sovereign being made up of many, many parts. Just taking a couple of breaths here, just into the fullness of who you are and what you bring into this circle. Looking around this fire, who do you want to get to know better? Who has something to share with you today? And taking another breath and following your exhale back up and out, back into this space together. So friends, I'm going to invite you into a quick practice. So continuing to just hold the energy of whatever you noticed in that meditation, whether or not you saw a ring of parts of you sitting around a fire, or whether you just kind of sat with the idea. I'm going to invite you to get a source of images. This could be a magazine, a book, a image that's just in your space, just anything that has some images that that you can look through. We're not going to damage these images at all, so it can be a book that you like. I'm just going to give you a minute to grab that. If you are watching along on the recording, please do join us in this activity. And those of you who are on with me, just give me a thumbs up when you are ready. I see a thumbs up. Just looking for one source of a collection of images. Got another thumbs up. Okay. So for those of you who are still looking for images, can listen along. For those of you who have them, I'm just going to invite you to look through what you have gathered, and just doing this just quickly enough that you're not dwelling on any one image, but you're able to really take in each image as you see it. And you're going to just choose one image that stands out to you for any reason. You don't have to know why, but for some reason, this is one that jumps out to you. Perhaps it even feels like it chooses you. And again, allowing yourself to move through quickly enough that you're not analyzing, agonizing, trying to make the perfect choice. Just letting any image that grabs your attention for any reason be the one that you choose today. And then if you have found this image, just take a moment to take it in. Just looking at the many aspects of this image. Perhaps there's a central feature and then some smaller features. Perhaps there is a lot going on in the image. Maybe it's just one thing. But just letting yourself take in the details. And then when you feel like you've taken it in, and some of you may be still looking, you might be with me, you might be not. I'm just going to keep us moving through for time's sake. But you can go back on the recording and do this again in a slower pace if you wish. But when you feel ready, like you've taken in the image, you're simply going to ask the image itself, who are you? And then you're going to answer, either out loud or in a journal, or maybe in your mind, beginning with the phrase, I am one who. So who are you? I am one who. Complete the sentence. And then when you feel you have a piece of an answer there, you can ask, is there anything I should be paying attention to today? And let the image answer. Okay. So we did this quickly, in part for time, but also because when we move through something quickly like this, it can be a way to allow our subconscious to speak through our rational mind, which wants to figure it out and spend time and, get the right answer. So sometimes we need to bypass that inclination. However, if that was too fast for you, again, circle back to it when you have more time. But I'd love to hear any reactions, anything that you might have noticed, anything that might have been surprising or interesting or confusing or meh, whatever about that little quick practice. And you can drop that in chat or you can come off of mute and let me know. I see you, Justine.
I know. I was waiting. You know me well at this point. What just happened, and when I say, oh, it was extraordinary, but it's just becoming my, my Wednesday, which I adore. The more I do this work with you in all these different capacities, the more that these things just become my everyday, and it's incredible. But so I actually already had a stack of magazines, and when you said that, I was like, no, there's something over. I have this like kind of metal bucket, that I kind of keep random things in. I was like, no, there's something in there that I need. And I'm a Denver Art Museum membership holder, and so they send these like magazines out.
Yeah.
And weirdly, I mean, it went to the back of it. I haven't cleared it out in a while. And I grabbed this one. I have no idea what's even in here. It's just, like I said, a member magazine. And it's from June 2022. So it tells you how long ago I cleared out my thing. And I open it up, and what do I see? But there's a beautiful giant image of celebration of kind of like a Dia de los Muertos, which we know is today. And this one specifically, though, is challenging ideas of identity, cultural appropriation. This is from some beautiful collaborative artists in Argentina.
Nice.
And when you were asking, and I was like, whoa, that's right. That's what I was looking for. And not even purposely, it just kind of all came together, because when I was in the campfire, what came forward were there were two images of saints. And I was like, I don't even know, I was having an argument with myself. Is it St. Joseph or St. Anthony? I don't know. And then I was like, what is that? I was like, oh, today is also All Saints Day. So all these kind of images are already coming out in ways that I'm not ready. And when I see this and you're saying, who am I? I am one who illuminates light. I am on people's shadows, on helping them see who they truly are, right? Because this artistry here is about celebration, but also these individuals, if you can see, they are not just wearing masks. And these masks are representing a dog. And the whole idea is that even with people who are getting support, like Argentina, for instance, that recognizes same-sex marriage, there's still a lot of shadow in that, where people aren't still. And so these two artists were basically saying, yes, we're allowed to be seen, but we're still not allowed to be seen, right? Not in the full capacity. And I recognize that in the work I do as a Reiki practitioner, that's the very essence of what I do, is I help people see. I have an ability to see people, and in doing that, I can help them see themselves fully. And so I just, again, sorry, that was a lot, but that's how it all kind of,
I love it.
in that 3 minute span, that's what happened.
So Justine kind of sets us up for a lot of the pieces that I wanted to share with you. So for others of you, if there's anything that you also want to share, I really invite you to put that in the chat as we move through. I'm going to just go into some slides, but I'd love to get any input that you all want to share. So we saw just in what Justine just shared, right? We saw intuition, right? I prepared a stack of magazines. However, something inside of me said, go look in the bin, right? So part of the practice of soul collage involves developing our intuition. It helps us to develop our intuition, and our intuition helps us in the soul collage process. And then we want to be open and curious, right? Because our conscious mind, again, really wants to figure things out and have a plan and know the answer, right? But there's a part of ourself that we're not aware of that has perhaps a different plan. And it's that part of ourself that Soul Collage helps us to connect with and to better understand and to be in collaboration with. Because so much of our decisions, our feelings, our behaviors, our impulses, our desires, our fears are generated by our subconscious, by the parts of ourselves that we're not consciously aware of most of the time. However, we do have access to it. So there are many practices that help us to get in touch with our subconscious. And that's been the subject of a lot of different branches of psychology, and has birthed things like the arts therapy movement and this practice of soul collage. So let me tell you a little bit more about this practice. So soul collage was developed by Stina Frost, a Jungian psychologist who was actively practicing in the 1990s and the 80s and into the 2000s. I actually had the honor of being one of the last students that trained with her as a soul collage facilitator in the early 2000s before she passed away. So Sina noticed that in working with the work of Carl Jung, that there were very large emphasis on the subconscious, on the concept of archetypes, which are energies in the world that we're in relationship with, and the way in which collage as an intuitive art form can help us to access those places. Carl Jung worked with collage extensively and really tracked and noticed the way that working with found images can really help to open up our access to the subconscious differently than when we are consciously making images ourselves. So if we're drawing an image, that can be a really powerful way of expressing something. But if we find an image that we didn't plan on, that we didn't intend to work with, but that touches us in some way, well, that opens up a space that we perhaps didn't even know was there. And so when we work with Soul Collage, we begin with found images. And so you can see here a couple of workshop participants. Diane was going to join us today. She's on the left there. She just got back from a trip. But Diane has been working with me for many years in both Soul Collage and Reiki, and just has worked with this process for a long, long time. You use these images then to create a card. And as you can see in this picture, the cards are fairly small. So it's a fairly small scale collage. Oftentimes collages are very large because you're working with found images, which can be varying sizes. But in this case, we work with a small scale collage for two reasons. One, so that each collage can be focused on one aspect of ourself. We don't want to get too many parts of ourselves involved in one time because we want to be able to talk to one part of ourself. The second reason is that we want to be able to use these cards like you would an oracle deck. You want them to be manageable, right? You want to be able to stack them up in a deck and handle them and move them around and create images with them. So we keep them on a small scale. Once we have created the cards, then we want to get to know who has come forward. And so we go through a process of journaling similar to what we just did with the found image that you just looked at. And we begin with that simple question of who are you? And when we ask this question of this image that perhaps we don't understand yet, but that we've just created, that opens up that part of ourself that responded to the images that said, hey, that image is the one that you want to work with. That magazine that's in the bin behind you, instead of the ones that you consciously chose, these are the ones that are going to have something to say. When you ask those images, who are you? That part of your subconscious, that part of you gets a chance to speak. And then we literally speak as that part of ourself, and we say, I am one who, and we describe We describe what is on that part of ourselves' mind. And then once we start to get to know that part of ourselves, we can consult that part of ourselves. We can ask it questions. We can get behind its motivations. So Sina, when she developed the practice of SoulCollage as a therapeutic practice, she divided the cards into 4 suits. Now that is, of course, reflective of the 4 suits in a regular deck of cards, the 4 suits in a tarot deck. It's a convenient way to organize these parts of ourselves. Not everybody uses that organizational system, but it's one that's very useful. The first suit is called the committee suit. And this is our personality. It's the roles that we play. It's our talents, our fears, our identities, our memories, our goals, the mysterious parts of ourselves that we don't understand yet. And we use SoulCollage to get an image of those parts of ourselves that can let us know kind of what is going on behind the scenes. Let's see, Justine, you ask, you were wondering how SoulCollage differs from vision boards. Ah, perfect. Yeah, I'll get to that. Energetic difference is significant. Yes, it is. So in a vision board, which is a commonly used form of collaging, we are projecting an image of our desires, our goals for a period of time, typically, let's say for a year, for a half a year. And we're putting those goals into images. Let me actually come back to you so I can see you. And because we can see the images that reflect that goal, that have meaning to us, that inspire us in some way, that are attractive to us, that we put together in a vision board, and we put that somewhere visible in our space, and we probably included some words and some motivational quotes and some whatever else helps us to focus our attention on that goal. That is in fact what happens. I've used vision boards for years, and they are very effective in helping us to focus our attention on our goals. And what happens when we focus our attention on something is our energy goes to that thing, and our behaviors shift in the direction of that thing. Our choices begin to reflect that thing, right? If we're looking at our goals all the time, the representation that we've created of our goals and the things we want in our life, and then we are faced with a choice that, one branch of that choice might lead us further towards those goals, and then another branch of that choice might distract us from those goals or help us to procrastinate, we're more likely, not guaranteed, we're more likely to choose the path that leads towards our goals because they're front of mind. They're in our consciousness all the time because we're looking at them. When I make a vision board, I hang it right in front of my bed. So it's the first thing I see when I wake up and the last thing I see when I go to bed. It's very effective. With SoulCollage, there's some significant similarities and differences. We're still using images to focus our attention, but where are we focusing? We're focusing internally. We're focusing on the parts of ourself that already exist, right? Not on a goal that doesn't exist yet. We're focusing on the parts of ourself that are already here. We're focusing on the parts of ourselves that we might not be paying attention to, right? So that's similar. We're wanting to focus our attention, and we're allowing those parts to be in communication with us. And we can do a lot with that, right? For example, there might be a part of ourself that is absolutely getting in the way of achieving those goals, 100% self-sabotaging from getting to whatever we put on our vision board, right? I've got tons of those, right? And we might need to have a moment with that part of ourselves, right? We might need to become aware of its motivations. Why is it guiding us the way that it is? And what does it need from the whole of us, the conscious of us, to shift that behavior, to get out of our way? For example, the very first card that I ever made, SoulCollage card I ever made, represented my imposter syndrome. And I did not want to make a card for my imposter syndrome. I wanted to make some beautiful, inspiring card. But what needed to get made on that day was my imposter syndrome, because I had a huge budget meeting with my boss the next day. And I was terrified of this meeting. And I knew I needed to ask for a larger budget. And there was this part of myself, my imposter syndrome, that's like, you don't deserve a bigger budget. He's going to say no. He's going to know you're a fraud, right? You better not ask for a bigger budget. You better cut your budget. All right, you probably should cancel this meeting because it's going to be awful, right? That part of myself was just like running the script in the back of my mind without my knowing. What I did know was that my stomach was in knots and I was terrified to go into this meeting, but I didn't know why. So I made this card. I literally sat down on my bed and had a conversation with this part of myself and was like, look, I see that you're afraid and that you're trying to keep me small to keep me safe so I don't go and humiliate myself. But like, I'm strong enough to do this. I really need to. I deserve it. Whatever I said to that card. And kind of set it aside, said, look, we're going to keep working, but you just take a rest. You don't come with me to my budget meeting. I'm going to go by myself. And I woke up and my stomach was not in knots anymore. Right. And I was able to move forward with that goal. So that's kind of how a vision board and SoulCollage are similar but different, and how they can work together, right? Because whatever it is we're trying to achieve on that vision, there is probably some part of ourself that's getting in the way. And it probably has a good reason, right? Which we'll talk a little bit more about when we talk about shadow cards. All right. So our committee. Just a sampling of my committee cards. I've got about 200 cards in my deck at this point. The one on the left is my protective mother. I have lots of cards representing my identity as a mom, some of which are lovely and some of which are not so lovely. In the center is the card for my observer. That's the part of myself that can kind of take a detached stance and just observe what's happening in my life and make decisions. And then on the bottom right is my painful transitions card. So representing times in my life when I had to change or transition. It was for the best, but it was painful. Okay, so that's the first suit. The second suit is called the companions. And the companion suit represents the wisdom of our body and our connection to the natural world. So in this suit, I include our intuition. I do a whole series of classes on intuition, and I really understand the intuition as the connection between our deepest self and the world around us, the web of life, if you will. And so originally when Sina Frost developed this suit, she used the image of the internal totem pole. There's a book that kind of goes through that. It's a little bit problematic in a culturally appropriative sort of way, but also useful and has some really useful psychological concepts in it. And then she used also the chakra system, the map of our energy body that comes through Indian spirituality, to help just kind of give us an anchor and points of focus for understanding this idea of the energies of our body, the wisdom of our body. I have done a lot of work with the companion suit to expand how we would work with it beyond working with the chakra system and the internal totem pole, and incorporating embodiment practices through Reiki and other practices. And I'm actually participating in a really lovely online class focused entirely on the companion suit that I'll share about later. But this is just some examples of cards from that suit in my deck. The third suit is called the community suit. And this is cards representing real life people or animals who have influenced aspects of our life and our identity. So the way that I think about this is that each of us, we're not isolated. We are in community. We are social beings and have come in contact with many, many, many people and animals and other beings in our lifetime. People that we know in person and people we don't know, like artists or writers or politicians or thinkers, people out in the world who their contribution to the world has influenced us strongly. And there's some part of ourself that is what it is or has been influenced by that relationship with that other person. So in other words, this part of me wouldn't look the way that it does if I wasn't in relationship with this other person. And so these cards from the community suit represent those parts that have been influenced. This example is just kind of from my most immediate family. The card on my left is my younger daughter. The card in the middle is representing my father, and on the right, my mother. You can have multiple cards representing the same person. Some of my cards are like that, different aspects of them, different ways that they've influenced us. For example, my ex-husband got a couple of different cards representing him, some of which are not so nice, some of which are very nice. We have complex relationships in this life. And the fourth suit is called the council suit. And this is representing archetypes. I mentioned that this work comes through Jungian psychology, very, very heavily drawing on the work of Carl Jung. And he really introduced the concept of archetypes into our lexicon and our understanding of the world. And the way I would describe it is that an archetype is a universal energy, and universal meaning within human psyche and the human culture. Not necessarily universal beyond kind of our own human psyche, but these are forms that get repeated over and over and over again within human societies and in our mind, our concept of ourselves and the world, that get, expressed in many different ways, but that they show up over and over again. Concepts like the mother, the father, the healer, the warrior, the leader. The one here in the center is the wild woman. On the left is the water bearer. On the right is the seeker. So we will make cards representing archetypes that are really alive in our life. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of archetypes that could be named. But they're not all active in everybody's life all the time, right? There's generally going to be a collection of archetypes that are meaningful or alive or active in our life, whether or not we are aware of it. Oftentimes we can track them through our profession, right? Through our hobbies, the things that really light us up, that, really, that we've gravitated to, or the things that are particularly challenging for us that kind of continue to come up over and over again as a pain point or a difficulty. And being in relationship with these archetypes, working with them, understanding how these kind of big energies in the world that are outside of ourselves influence us. There's a way in which that can help us to depersonalize some of our challenges when we can see that there's energies in the world that influence us. It's not just our own little selves, right? It's a connected world, and we're influenced by the web of life, by other humans, by history, by culture, by art, by creativity. And that can be really, really helpful to be in touch with those influences. Okay. So Justine mentioned shadows earlier. One of the really powerful ways in which we can use SoulCollage is to work with our shadows. This is also a concept that comes through Jungian psychology, and that has been explored in many, many different contexts, and is a really, really powerful and helpful concept. A lot of different ways to understand shadow. So in this context, what we're talking about is the parts of ourselves that either we hide from ourselves and others, or that we are just not aware of at all, but that are kind of guiding our behavior. It might be the parts of ourselves that we feel shame around, or that we feel that we've disowned. So parts of ourselves that we just don't want to look at, we don't want to deal with, we've turned away from. So the idea of disowned parts is a powerful one. It's something that comes up a lot in therapeutic practices like family systems therapy, where we're, again, looking at multiple parts of ourself and coming back into relationship with them. One of the things that's really powerful and important about the way that shadows are seen in SoulCollage and in other modalities is that these are not parts of ourself that are inherently bad, even if they are on the uglier side. Here in this collection of cards, on the left is that imposter syndrome card that I told the story of earlier. On the right is my liar card, the part of me that sometimes lies or is dishonest. And in the center is one of my mother cards, part of my identity as a mother, and this is my codependent mother. So a way of mothering that I find to be really ugly and shameful. However, all of these parts of me that I find to be ugly and shameful and would rather not show you or talk about or even look at myself, they all exist inside of me for good reasons. They're all there ultimately to help keep me safe. They might have really messed up strategies for keeping me safe, right? They might have strategies that are really causing me trouble in my life, like that imposter syndrome, making me so resistant to thriving in my job. Like the liar part of myself that sometimes has a hard time telling the truth, like the codependent mother that sometimes parents my kids in a way that is not that's not good for them or for me. But all of those parts of myself and many others that I might identify as bad are actually not bad because they're part of me for a reason. Now, they might be causing me a lot of trouble and I might need to get a handle on them. But what that usually means is that they need something. That there's that part of me, that imposter syndrome needs something in order to feel safe and relaxed so that it can just let me do my job, right? And so by giving them voice and giving them an image and giving them a tactile form that I can hold in my hand and feel a little bit of distance from, a little bit of separation from, and sit down and have a conversation with, can be incredibly powerful for healing and satisfying whatever need that part represents, so that it can calm down and stop trying to run the show and maybe go to sleep or retire forever and go away, right? Or not go away, transform, right? Bioremediate, compost into something different. Now, another way to understand shadows is that any part of ourself can be either a light version of itself or a shadowed version of itself. So I just kind of picked at random 2 cards that to me are representing positive sides of myself. Ironically, they're very similar. Didn't even realize that. They're both like, they look the same, very similar composition here with these 2 cards. Interesting. On the left is a card that I call home. So it's about the feeling of home, the feeling of being at home in myself and in my environment. And on the right is called something like caring for my body. It's about, being kind to my body and exercising and doing all the good things. But any side of ourselves that we view as positive can have a shadowed version. And usually what we mean by that is that that part of ourself can be too much or too little. So for example, if there's too much of the part of me that wants to care for my body, maybe I get distracted by that. Maybe I get hyper focused on, exercise or diet or whatever it is. And I start to neglect other parts of my life, or I start to get really, fixated on that thing in a way that's not healthy. Or there might be not enough. So a shadowed side of a part of ourself usually means there's either too much of it or not enough of it. Now, with this one around taking care of my body, usually it shows up as a shadow by being not enough of it. In other words, I'm just not taking good care of my body. I'm not exercising, right? I'm not doing things that I know would be kind to my body. And so there's not enough of it. So that part of myself is in shadow because there's not enough of it alive in my life. I'm going to just pause right there and come back to you.
Sorry. I find it fascinating. I started to type it in, but I was like, I don't really know how to say it. I love the fact that you reflect on that your light and shadow, we're so similar in so many ways. And that's one of the awareness this conversation is having for me, is that what I would consider one of my most obvious shadows is also conversely one of my most obvious forms of light, right? and I'm in the process of really trying to identify what part of it do I consider like just the gradations even of shadow, right? Because like you said, shadow is a contribution to our awareness of ourselves just as much as what we value. I just kind of coming to terms with bringing them both to light in full acceptance, but at the same time using those to actually become more settled and for healing,
Yeah.
those areas.
You're bringing a couple of really important points, and this is a place where kind of bringing in concepts from the system of Reiki, like non-duality and integration, is really valuable, right? Because from our Western mind, we often tend to see it in a dualistic way. We have light side, we have a shadow side, right? We have good parts, bad parts, right? But this practice, and then again, bringing influences from other practices like Reiki, helps us to see that it's not stark like that, right? Like you said, like so, oftentimes our greatest superpower is an aspect of our greatest shadow, right? They're connected, they're integrated together, and it's connected across our life. And so, oftentimes, in and we see this in superhero stories, right? This is one of the reasons that I draw so heavily on like science fiction and fantasy and, the kinds of stories that give you a window into a person's journey. Because oftentimes the story of a superhero like follows this arc of integrating their light and shadow sides, right? And oftentimes their greatest contribution to the world comes from their struggle. At least those are the interesting stories. Those are the ones that I like the best. And so yeah, I think at its best and most valuable, using SoulCollage helps us with integration in that way. And I think I often caution people against looking at these parts in that dualistic way of like, well, these are the bad parts of me that I need to fix, and these are the good parts of me that I need to like uplift, right? It's more of like, can I understand the motivations behind all of the parts of myself, perhaps where they came from,
Yeah,
you
is
know,
in a
and,
way.
and, and what they need, right? Because ultimately a shadow side of ourselves, is some unmet need that needs to be addressed.
Mhm.
So let me just show you one more way to think about and work with SoulCollage on this theme of integration. And that's and this is kind of coming outside of what is in the SoulCollage teachings proper. This is kind of a grouping that I've come up with just to help with my work. But I call it guilds. And this is cards across the four suits that are in relationship to each other. And that when we work with them together as a guild, as a group, we can come to deeper parts. So this is what I call my Seekers Guild. So we have a committee card, an aspect of my identity that I call intense curiosity. We have a companions card. That's again the wisdom of our body. This one is related to vision and to kind of seeing beyond the obvious. For my committee cards, a card representing my friend Bretta, who is incredibly good at these things. She's very courageous, very curious, very adventurous person. And so represents this kind of energy of seeking and finding and being curious and having vision. And then the council card of the seeker, the energy, the archetype in the world that represents seeking of all kinds, right? That the human impulse to go out in the world and find something important to ourselves. So these four kind of operate together in my life. We've got the Mother Guild. So one of the cards representing myself as a mother, the attentive mother. I just put this card representing the full energy map because really all of the wisdom of the body comes to play in some of our identities. Certainly that's true in my identity as a parent. My community card representing my actual mom, and then the council card of the mother, the archetype of the great mother, that which is often represented as a goddess in many cultures. And then finally, the Creators Guild. So my own personal identity as an artist, the creative center in my body, which is in my belly, a particular artist in the world who has influenced me greatly, the author Barbara Kingsolver, and the council. You could put a lot of different council cards here. I chose the council card of the water bearer because that represents a lot of things, but that includes kind of depth and movement and creative nature. So just kind of showing another way to work with them. And so once we have a collection of cards, we can work with them in a lot of different ways. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I wanted to just show you this picture. Firstly, that represents one of the ways that we can work with our cards, and then that invites you into some ways that you might want to work with me. So this is Diane again, who was in our first picture. as I said, she and I have worked together for a lot of years in Reiki and Soul Collage. And this was during she did a series of one-on-one mentoring sessions, which I call soul tending journeys, where she was working through her decision to retire from her job. She was still a few years out from that decision, from completing that, but she was starting to prepare herself emotionally, mentally, physically for that huge transition in her life. And so we worked together for several months on that. And this picture shows what I call a card constellation, where we kind of start with a particular experience or question or feeling or problem, or, we can put a lot of different things in the center. And then we kind of map using the cards from that center. It's very narrative. The person is kind of telling their own story as they go through. And we end up with a map that represents, a snapshot of their experience around that centered thing. And it's a really powerful and detailed way of working with the cards, but there are many, many different ways that they can be worked with. One thing actually I didn't say already, but I want to say, I'll come back to you to say, is I mentioned earlier the connection or the similarity between a Soul Collage deck and a Tarot deck. Significant difference, though, is that in a Soul Collage deck, we're drawing on our own internal wisdom. So it's an oracle deck, but it's the oracle of you. Nobody else can tell you what those cards mean. Nobody else can tell you what information they have for you, what wisdom they have for you. So rather than a tarot card reader saying, here's the cards that came forward, here's what they mean, right? You are the one reading your own cards. So in a session like the one we just looked at with Diane, she's the one narrating the story, and I'm asking guiding questions, help, using embodiment practices when a person gets stuck, like kind of helping to facilitate the journey. But the meaning making is coming from her because it is the oracle of her, not of me. Okay, and gosh, we are down to our last 2 minutes. Cutting it tight today. So I'll just say that if this is something that feels resonant for you, that feels juicy, that you might want to jump on board with, there are various ways that we can work together. As I said, I work with people one-on-one, either as a single session or as a soul tending journey where we do multiple sessions around a particular exploration. I'm going to start offering classes regularly again. This 1-hour introduction class is the kickoff to that intention. So thank you for joining me for that. And the next one will begin in January. I'm going to be sending out an email to everyone registered for this class that will give you that information. I am going to also be offering a Soul Collage based retreat, an in-person retreat coming in the spring. The classes will have an online option, and also customized sessions for your own community, your celebrations, your gatherings, your groups, your book club, your work office. I've done Soul Collage in so many different contexts, including at a government office, which was super fun. Let's see, Justine, you had one last question. It seems that it would take quite a bit of time to create these cards as they require deep contemplation and intuitive gathering of resources. Did you make your deck before the class? Okay, so yes and no. Will the upcoming classes be classes where we make cards? Yes, they will. Let me come back to you. The upcoming classes, we will be making cards. The one that is going to start in January, it's going to be a 6-week class. We're going to do an introduction. We're going to walk through those 4 suits, making cards, interpreting them, and then a closing that goes through some techniques for working with the cards. My desire is that if this is something that feels juicy and resonant for people, that they come out of it with a lot of confidence in working with it on their own. And then of course, also coming back if they want to, but I want you to be able to feel like this is a practice you can take on and work with yourself. So it'll be a very comprehensive deep dive. And in terms of the time for making cards, so yes and no. I've been working with Soul Collage for about 12 years. Like I said, I have about 200 cards in my deck, and some of those cards got made really, really quickly. Like in the beginning, I made a ton, like in the first, year or so. And then now I make them more sporadically, less frequently. Um, each card making session, generally in a class or workshop setting, I'll give about an hour to an hour and a half for card making. And usually people will make between 1 and 3 cards in that time. Obviously, that's not a ton of cards. When we think about all the parts of you, there's so many parts of you, so many more than the 200 that are in my deck. But what's amazing is how valuable even just one can be. So I have a lot of people that have worked with me just one time. They've made 1 or 2 or 3 cards. They've gotten a lot of value from that. And that's all they ever did. That was what they needed, right? They didn't want to follow that thread. Totally fine. They will be well equipped to continue working with those cards if they wish. If again, it feels juicy and you follow that thread, making cards can be very fast, and it can be something that takes a lot of time. What I generally recommend is that people put some time boundaries on their card making process, again, because it's so easy for our conscious mind to get in there and say, I want to make this perfect. I want to make this an amazing piece of art. We are not making a piece of art. We might create something that we find compelling or beautiful at the end of it, but that is not the point, right? The point is to give form to an aspect of ourselves. And so we do want to kind of contain that, right? The smaller size of the collage and a shorter time frame for making the collage so that we can kind of work in that more intuitive space and not get into analysis. When we work with the cards, we're still in the intuitive space, but now we're in more of that conscious analysis space. There's techniques for doing that. There's techniques for doing it quickly. There's techniques for doing it over a long period of time. It can be expansive. Do you continue making the cards for your own deck over the years? Yes. I just made one the other day for one of my community members, Sinead O'Connor, who just passed recently. That was a big celebrity death for me. She's influenced my life greatly. And I was like, man, I wish I'd made a card for her years ago, but now is the time. So I just made this one recently. And, but I hadn't made one for a while. So it kind of ebbs and flows. Oftentimes it's in response to something, or I'll step into somebody else's class that they're facilitating and just kind of let it be a creative, spontaneous experience. Let's see. You said I actually make a personal oracle deck years ago for myself, but never analyzed it in depth. I'm wondering if I could apply this perspective to the deck I already have. Yeah, probably. Sure. Yeah, that would be super interesting, right? To go back and see what came forward at that time and put a little bit of structure and analysis around it, see if it still resonates, undoubtedly, there's parts of yourself in there that are still around and still have things to say. There might be parts that you don't resonate with anymore. So yeah, I think that would be a really interesting conversation and process to have. One of the things I love about this practice is that it put a structure around something we already do naturally, right? We already seek out images that speak to us, that come through our self-conscious. You just look around your space, you're probably surrounded by images or auditory cues or sensory experiences that you're compelled by, and maybe you don't even know why, right? There's some part of yourself that was like, ooh, that, I need to be surrounded by that. I need to reflect that, brought it into your space, right? And so it can be really interesting to apply this perspective of like, what part of me is represented here and does it have something to say? When I started working with SoulCollage in this way, I started kind of moving my stuff around more often, like noticing if there was like, oh, I put that picture, that sculpture, that little altar there years ago, and now it's just kind of flat and dead and lifeless, and like, let's get that out of here. Like that part of me is not active anymore. Let's move that on out of here. Or, oh, that actually needs to be refreshed, right? Like that needs to be brought forward. So yeah, this process really does get reflected in a lot of different parts of our life. Do you ask a question and then pull a card like an oracle deck, or just pull cards to see what energy comes up, or both? Yeah, there's so many ways to work with them. I have a colleague, Michelle Manos, who's brilliant in developing card reading techniques. She hosts these big like card games gatherings where she just like so many different cool things. But in the basic, you've named kind of the two directions that are most common. One, to pose a question that is about ourselves, not about somebody else. It could be about our feelings or responses to somebody else, but that is about us. That's about something that's alive right now, something that's, feels present right now. And, there's kind of an art to asking good questions. But yeah, you ask a question. I usually then pull 4, maybe 5 cards. And you can do it blind. I usually do it blind, just kind of like you would pull oracle cards, where you're just kind of using your intuition, or using at random, like which parts are going to have something to say about this question. Or you can do it looking, right? You can consciously choose which parts you want to consult about this question. You can also do a card for the day. So that might look like just pulling a card at random and just like, hey, what should I be paying attention to today? Or like, just having that be an energy. Oh, I'm going to appreciate this part of myself today, right? Those are 2 really common ways of doing it. The more elaborate energy mapping that I showed you the picture of with Diane is a more complex way. We spent several hours creating that map, and it was, again, in the context of a longer process. So, a little bit more of an elaborate way to do it. Yeah, lots and lots of different ways to work with them. Yeah. And you can use traditional tarot spreads, right? Like I know there's all kinds of different ways of laying out tarot cards to accomplish different things. You can kind of use that tradition as well. Okay. Any other questions or reflections? Thank you all so much for gathering. I hope that I get to be with you again in some context. I will send out that email that shares upcoming opportunities for us to gather and other resources if you want to follow this thread. And hopefully the link for our next free class, I got to get that up on the website. Glad to have you join us again for another Sweet Taste of HeartScapes, where we dive into practices that help us live a life that is rooted, spacious, connected, and to help us remember ourselves. Thank you so much. Have a beautiful day. Love you. Bye.